Greetings, everyone. My name is Justin Reich. We're totally thrilled to have you here joining us for this live event. Greetings, everyone. Let me just get the reverb to stop. Yeah, my name is Justin Reich. I want to welcome the 4,000 people from 130 countries around the world who signed up for Design Thinking for Leading and Learning. We're thrilled to have you all part of this learning experience. I want to especially welcome the 50 or so folks who are joining us live for this special event. I want to thank all of you who are introducing yourselves in the forums. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat window there that's next to the video you're seeing in this live event. Already we have folks from Chile and Brazil and from Philadelphia and from California and from Hong Kong and from Florida and from New Hampshire and from Louisiana and here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we're having an absolutely gorgeous day, which we haven't had in an awfully long time. And so people are in a pretty good mood. This is great. Folks from Cyprus, folks from New Jersey, folks from Brooklyn, New York. So thrilled to have you all here and joining us. I'm an assistant professor here at MIT. I'm in a department called Comparative Media Studies, and I run a lab called the Teaching Systems Lab. The Teaching Systems Lab investigates the complex technology-rich classrooms of the future and the systems that we need to help educators thrive in those settings. Another way to describe our work is that we think teachers are awesome, and we try to help them be even more awesome. One of the projects that I'm working on right now here at MIT is a class called Designing the First Year Experience. MIT is a great university, but part of what makes a great university great is constantly trying to be better. And we think there's a lot of work that we could do to improve the first year experience for students, to make it feel more welcoming, to make students feel more like they're at home here, to strike a better balance between giving them a common learning experience to start from, but also making sure they can explore all the incredible opportunities that MIT has to offer. And as we've imagined how we might make progress on improving the first year, we realized one of the most important things that we could do is invite students to join us in that process, to not just have another faculty committee that goes off by themselves and decides what would be good for young people, but to recognize, you know, we have a bunch of super smart, talented young people here, and they should be helping us think about what would be a great first year at MIT. So we've created this course called Designing the First Year Experience. It's an interdisciplinary course. It has people who do systems design from the aeronautics department. It has me, who does a bunch of education stuff. It has wonderful Professor Maria Yang from mechanical engineering, who studies early stage brainstorming and ideation. There's Glenn Urban from the Sloan School of Management, who studies, you know, how businesses create new ideas and how those ideas fail or not. And so we've come together and we're in the midst of putting the students through a set of design thinking exercises. So we sent them all across the Institute, investigating what different stakeholders think and believe about the first year experience, talking to pre-frosh, the people who have just got admitted to MIT, talking to current first year students, talking to recent first year students, talking to faculty in our 5 schools, talking to our visiting committee, talking to parents, talking to alumni, trying to get a whole set of stakeholders. And then trying to figure out, you know, sort of what the needs are and what the challenges are to brainstorm a series of things that we think could improve the first year experience. And then what they've been doing over the past couple of weeks has been trying to build prototypes of those experiences. So one of the challenges of imagining something like the first year experience is this really complex system with all these different parts. And it can be hard to just, you know, write down a set of ideas you have and show them to folks and say, hey, what do you think about these ideas? So we've encouraged people to really try to build prototypes of those experiences. So one of their main concerns has been around advising. So we've had a bunch of groups that have been role playing different kinds of structures for advising, different kinds of scaffolds to make advising be more useful or more efficient or more meaningful. And so, you know, sort of going beyond saying, all right, here's a new set of policies for advising, but here's what that experience of advising might really look like and feel like. And as we explore the details of this experience, that's giving us more ideas for what the big picture might look like. One of my concerns in thinking about design thinking is that there's a great article that came out in The Atlantic. I think I mentioned this in the course last year that was called something like, is design thinking just a new buzzword in education? And sitting here at MIT, we would say, no, not at all. Design thinking is how people across the university invent the future. Design thinking is how, when we see a problem in our own curriculum here at MIT, this is a set of techniques and tools that we apply to try to improve the learning that we have going on our own campus. And we want to share with you what we've learned about these processes and make them more accessible to you in your own school and your own learning environments. So that's a story about some of the kinds of things that I'm working on here at MIT that I hope are really connected to the kinds of things that you're working on in your own schools, and I hope are inspiring you to be here. So one of the main purposes of this time together is just to answer whatever questions you have about the course. I'll give you a few more details about the kinds of things that we'll do together. But feel free. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat window. It's great to see you introduce yourselves and see about all the different kinds of things that you're working on. Please feel free to ask whatever questions you have about the logistics of the class, or the content of the class, or us as instructors, or whatever else it is. We'd love to be able to try to answer whatever questions that you have. So I've told you a little bit about me, some things that I'm working on, told you about this lab that we work on, the teaching systems lab. Let's talk a little bit about how the course is organized. So the course is organized around 3 modules, and in each of those modules, which is about 2 weeks long, you're going to have a chance to go through a full, go through a whole design cycle with emphasis on different parts of the design cycle. So in the first design cycle, you're going to be trying to understand just what design thinking is all about. And the way that we want to introduce that to you is to have you see a little bit about how design thinking is used across MIT. So we're going to meet some folks in the Sloan School of Management, in the Media Lab, in the Mechanical Engineering Department, all of whom use design thinking in their own practice. And then we'll have you do what we call kind of a toy exercise, so something which actually might be slightly separate from the world of education, to get you doing a full cycle of design, of investigating people's needs and understanding a problem, coming up with the solutions, prototyping those solutions, testing them, and getting feedback. If you wanted, sort of a 1-sentence description of trying to understand what design thinking is and how it's organized, design thinking is a toolkit for solving ill-structured problems. And it is a toolkit that emphasizes innovation through iteration. The idea being, it's really hard to step way back, look across a whole system and say, oh, I'm going to figure out in advance what the best solution to this problem is. Oftentimes, the best way of engineering solutions to complex problems is to jump into a problem, is to start trying to create and prototype parts of solution, parts of new ideas, and then see how they work in the real world. So beyond that, we're going to release 2 more units. Unit 2 is going to delve more deeply into what design thinking looks like inside K-12 classrooms. And then Unit 3 looks at how design thinking operates when communities of adults and young people get together to try to use design thinking to make improvements in schools. So Unit 2 is really at the classroom level, and Unit 3 is really at this broader school level. You'll have a choice of how you want to spend the second 2/3 of the course. You can do Unit 2 and then Unit 3. You can just focus on one. If you're a classroom teacher and you really want to zoom in on what's happening in your classroom, you can spend that 4 weeks working on Unit 2. If you're a school leader and you have some really big ideas about change you want to make, if you want to explore the whole thing, you can do both. This is our second time running the course. We ran it a year ago in April, and it was well received last time, and we're really excited to improve this run of the course. We found that people really valued the flexibility of the course and sort of taking it on their own terms, and we encourage you to do that too. We had a great question up here from Terry. What advice do you have for someone who's never taken a MOOC before? And I've got a couple of answers to that. The first thing that I want you to know is that we want you to take advantage of this learning experience however it's meaningful to you. We've created a course with some structures and some things like that to help you move your way through it. But this learning experience exists entirely for your benefit. So figure out however you can take advantage of the learning experience. We hope that you invest a whole bunch of time into what we're doing. We think you can get the most out of it that way. We'd really encourage you to start calendaring that time pretty early on. I think one of the things that helps folks be successful in independent learning environments is when they've said, okay, I'm really going to chart out right now. I'm going to go into my Google Calendar and I'm going to go through and find all the various times and places in which I know I'm going to carve out some time to be able to work on this stuff. The second big piece of advice we have is we really think these learning experiences are richer when you can do them with other people. So one of the things that you'll find throughout the course is an invitation to form what we call a learning circle. A learning circle is just a community of people within a particular organization that's taking the course together. One of the best ways that you can both have some mutual accountability to make sure that you continue working on the course even as life gets really busy, but also that you have a small team of people who's ready to take whatever you build in the course and use it to move forward into real change and real new ideas. If there's a few of you doing that together, it's a lot easier than doing it from your own lonely perch. So one of the biggest piece of advice for people getting started is find a couple of folks who are willing to do this with you. And again, if you can carve out some time to meet face-to-face once a week as you're going through, to talk about what you're learning, to do some activities together, to watch some parts of the course together and then discuss, that's one of the best ways we think to use the learning experiences in the course. And you'll see that we've got a facilitator's guide for the learning circles. We've got a bunch of resources for you to use to be able to do this together. Liz jumps in as well very helpfully and says that one of the most important things you can do is also find community inside the online course and inside the forums. And Exhibits on the Go asks a great question. Can learning circle or meetup happen with individuals outside your workplace? Absolutely. You can form any kind of learning circle you want. In fact, Exhibits, if you're working on museum kinds of things, it may be that actually forming a group with a couple of other people who are doing informal education stuff and taking the course together and meeting on Google Hangout or Microsoft Skype or something like that is a really useful way of connecting. So there's all kinds of ways of doing what we're doing. But the core principle is find other people that you're connected with and take the course together and be in community with one another. Victoria asks a great question that she's really interested in helping as a parent get some of these ideas in her child's school. And that's a great purpose of the course. To be clear, we have two kind of main audiences in our head when we're designing the course. We know that there are people, 4,000 people from 130 countries. There's folks who are all over the world who are doing this. And so to some extent, we have classroom teachers and school administrators, principals, and folks. Those are some of the sort of main people we have in our head as we're designing. But we know that there are paraprofessionals, there are library media specialists, there are school nurses, there are parents, there are school board members, there are business leaders. There's so many people who are connected to education in different ways. And we absolutely hope that you'll that all those different folks will come in and find ways to participate. So Victoria, we're thrilled that you're here and would be really grateful to have you bring your parents' perspective into the conversations that we're having online in the forum. And we very much welcome you, even as we want folks to know that some of you may be consultants working in other fields or things like that. We are really focused sort of primarily on K-12 education. Again, if there's some of you here from higher education, I'm kind of here from higher education, and we're delighted to have you as well. As long as folks realize that the course does have a kind of focus that helps us create some organization around it. Another piece of advice that I have for everyone taking the course is that we don't see this learning experience as one where the learning happens in one phase and then action and change happens in some second later phase. From our point of view, the ideal circumstance is that you take the kinds of things you're learning and you immediately begin to test them and put them into action in your schools or other learning environments. One of the things that we know about good professional learning is that it feels relevant and it feels connected to the kinds of work that people are doing. So don't feel like, oh, okay, at the end of 6 weeks, we're going to be able to, try some new things. The ideal set of circumstances is after the first couple of weeks, you'll feel like, oh, okay, I've got some ideas for some things that we can begin to do to get these ideas into the world. Angela asked the question, can Unit 3 content be applied to organizational change? I think absolutely. I think you're going to see examples and hear us talking about the application of design thinking ideas to changing one kind of complex social system, which are K-12 schools. And we think it'll be particularly useful for folks who are working in those K-12 schools. But absolutely, we hope that these ideas are useful for people who are working in different contexts. John asks a question, how does design thinking fit in with the English language arts curriculum? We'll answer that to some extent in Unit 2. I think one of the things that most teachers find as we begin to explore these ideas is that there's actually a bunch of parts of design thinking that they really recognize. And then there are other parts often that seem more new and more novel to them. For the people in the humanities, the earliest phases of design thinking are often about finding and identifying problems. It's about empathizing with people in their circumstances and understanding the kinds of things that impede them from having richer lives, whether that's little speed bumps in the way, or really deep, meaningful, powerful challenges. That's all the humanities does, is try to understand people and where they're from. The humanities tends to have a little bit less of the kind of engineering mindset of prototyping, putting things in the world, revising. To some extent, actually, you do see that in in the best work that we do when we're teaching kids to write in really iterative kinds of ways. But that sort of notion of intervening in the world is something that's often a little bit more of a push for humanities teachers. Whereas for science teachers, that part of the design thinking process is more natural or novel, more natural or sort of part of their typical practice. So that's a great question, John, and hopefully there'll be more folks who are answering that in Unit 2. You also asked, is this chat room archived? And I'm not 100% sure it is, but Liz might be able to jump in and give us some answers. I should introduce our three fabulous colleagues who help us organize and run the course. Liz Huttner-Lone is sort of the captain of the MOOC ship, the online course ship here in the Teaching Systems Lab, and she does an amazing job building communities and creating these learning experiences with us. Alyssa Napier has been with us for a year and a half. She's actually an MIT graduate who we're very proud is heading off to graduate school this fall, which we take every possible opportunity to remind people. But this is one of the last courses she'll be doing with us. You'll see her in the forums. Lots of great ideas and suggestions for her. And then we have a new member of our team, Corinne Glenworks, who, if you've taken our previous courses, you won't have had a chance to meet yet, but we're thrilled she's here. She's a PhD student at Tufts, and then has been a math teacher in the Revere Public Schools here. Has done some really cool stuff with personalized and competency-based learning with her team at Revere. And so those are more folks that you'll get to meet while you're here. Brian asked the question, there's going to be a whole bunch of resources in the online course. Are there any other authors that you recommend that we also read the work of? We see a lot of connections between this kind of work and the work of my co-professor in another course, Launching Innovation in Schools, Peter Senge, who's a professor of the School of Management here, who wrote a very famous book called The Fifth Discipline, which is a terrific resource for people to look at for thinking about this kind of iterative cycles of change. He also has a great book called Schools That Learn. There are a bunch of other folks that are out there who've been doing really neat things with design thinking and education. IDEO is a group that has a strong connection to the D School at Stanford, which also has some great people who are doing this kind of work. And all throughout the course, there'll be recommended readings and other kinds of things to look at. Norma asks a great question, how late can someone start? You've got plenty of time. The course is really designed, especially, we're heading into this first sort of 2-week module, and any time somebody could enter the course and have a really great experience of it. And frankly, even if they're a little bit later than that, the course isn't so prescriptive that if people jump in midway that they're going to be totally hopelessly lost or things like that. So we'd love to have any of you invite as many people as possible to come and join us. Norma also asked the question, can design thinking work to tweak existing curriculum projects or mostly for new designs? And absolutely, I think it can be applied to any of those ideas. In fact, to some extent, the core idea of design thinking, and I think this actually ends up being pretty novel for teachers, is a lot of the design work we do as teachers. We say, okay, I'm going to come up with a bunch of ideas somewhere and put them all together, and then I'm going to lay them out in front of my students and have them have a learning experience and see how it goes. And then a year later, I'll sort of resurrect it and see if I can do it again. A big part of design thinking is saying, how can I take, whether it's something new or whether it's something that I'm improving, and try to get some rapid iterative feedback on it before it's kind of deployed in its full state. I think a lot about new school in New York City called the Quest to Learn School. And part of why Quest to Learn is neat is because they have a whole curriculum that's built around games design and systems thinking. So they call their final projects boss battles and things like that. But the other thing is they actually have a little sort of curriculum development team that for a while was in a room in the middle of the school and the doors were always open. And so kids were sort of constantly passing through, kind of seeing what curriculum was going to show up in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks or things like that. And they would have, the great thing for the designers is that they would have the experience of having a couple of kids take a look at things and give some feedback before they move on and actually deploy that piece of curriculum in their classroom. I'm always thinking these days, how can we take assignments that we're planning on give kids and having a couple of folks look at them, a couple of folks try them? How can we take the exercises we're doing, the readings that we're giving, the projects that we're designing for people? How can we have us as teachers try to do the projects that we assign before we actually assign them and so forth? So yeah, hopefully it's something that you'll find meaningful, whether you're taking a piece and trying to iteratively improve it or whether you're starting something brand new. The Kansas City Creator Club said, doesn't design thinking have more to do with talking to user groups first? And absolutely, that's a really important part of what we're doing here. Some people when describe, one of the things that you'll find is that there are lots of folks who describe design thinking with different kinds of language. They're all talking about innovation through iteration. For some folks, the sort of initial phase of understanding a problem really involves empathizing with people, really trying to deeply understand stakeholders and where they're coming from. We think that's one great approach. There are other great approaches too to trying to understand problems and challenges. We call the sort of earliest phase discovering. And that's something that we'll be talking about in some of the various earliest parts of the course. How do you really try to understand what are the challenges that people are facing as learners, as people trying to run a school, as students trying to get through the day? How do we empathize with those folks, deeply understand their circumstances, and try to improve them? And talking with user groups is one way of doing that. Observing people is another way of doing that. There are lots of great ways of getting at things. Any feedback from last year's participants? How useful was the course? We do have a whole report that we wrote and published about last year's version of the course, which you're welcome to read if you go to the, we can put a link to it somewhere, but if you go to, I think the links don't work in the chat so that people don't come in and spam you with, buy gold links and things like that. But our website is tsl.mit.edu. And if you go to tsl.mit.edu/publications, I'm pretty sure posted there is the Design Thinking for Leading and Learning report. You can also probably just Google Design Thinking for Leading and Learning report. Let's see if that works. Design Thinking for Leading and Learning report. I'm pretty sure that you'll find our thing, Design Thinking for Leading and Learning report. This is what happens when you do real-time Googling. It doesn't show up that way, but we'll make sure you can take a look at it. I mean, I think generally speaking, people found the course to be a powerful learning experience where folks got a deeper understanding of design thinking. And for us, the most important thing is we begin to have evidence that people take what they're learning in the course and not just go, oh, that was kind of neat, I'm glad I thought about that, but really begin making changes in their own contexts. Zabin asks, are paper and pencil the tools you prefer for design thinking? And paper and pencil are great. Post-it notes are great. Computers are great. Google Slides, PowerPoint slides are great. There's lots of great ways of having people think. So the toolkit we're talking about, sometimes some parts of the physical toolkit are helpful, but a lot of what we're talking about are strategies for thinking. Terry Wells asks, so design thinking is kind of like play testing, and play testing is absolutely sort of a crucial part of design thinking. It's a crucial part of our own practice. So for any of you who are in the New England area, the Teaching Systems Lab is runs a bi-monthly play test. The next one is on May 8th, where we take all the different things that we're working on, different courses, different learning experiences for teachers, and we get them in front of folks to give us their feedback. We do a ton of that play testing internally just about every week on campus. We have somebody from our lab who's trying to gather some other people and get them to play something, mess around with something, give some feedback on something. But we also recognize that, we sort of lose perspective on our own ideas, and so we need to bring in outsiders. So for any of you who are in the New England area on May 8th, we'd welcome you to come and join us. These are some great questions, everyone. This is really fun. Great to have all of your enthusiasm here. Let's see if there's any other. Are there any prerequisites for students to be able to engage in design thinking? And I would say no. I don't know how far people have pushed sort of employing design thinking ideas with the youngest folks, but there's a part of design thinking which is just giving people a set of structures around logical problem solving, and particularly a process for being systematic about trying things. Chefs are great design thinkers. There's lots of folks who, and I think, there's parts of the way kids play, which is sort of naturally oriented around design thinking. How do we try a thing, see what happens in the world, let it fail, let it break, try again. I would encourage you. Another thing that we think would be great is we've had a couple of folks now. When we designed the course, we sort of, I think mostly people who are taking MOOCs are adults. But recently we've had a couple of folks who have taken some of our previous courses who've done so with students in their school, and we would love to have more students involved in various ways. Brian has to go to another meeting now, and despite the fact that he's a Yankees fan, we will welcome him to our community tepidly, but we'll welcome him nonetheless. Are there other things here? Norma asks, how do you sign up for the playtesting if you're local? And you go to tsl.mit.edu, and under Get Involved, there should be a link to the playtest on May 8th, and it would be great to see you and great to get a chance to meet you. What are the other things that I want to make sure you know? I also am pretty active on Twitter. I'm at BJFR. And so as things come up, feel free to post the stuff that you're working on. We have a hashtag for the course, which Liz will put in the chat window so that I make sure that I don't mess it up. I think it's a DTLL MOOC. Hashtag DTL MOOC, would welcome people to share the kinds of things that you're working on there. Feel free, as you come up with questions and things like that, to post them online there, or to post them in there in the forums. We try to keep a pretty close eye on what's going on there, and always want to be helpful and supportive of all the different kinds of learners that we have here. And I think that's most of what folks need to know to get started. If you have, maybe the last piece of advice is that, please do come to the course with a kind of bias to action. We would encourage you to feel empowered to jump right into the learning materials that are there, to make connections to us, to ask questions, to try things, to put things actually out there into the world, and see what you can learn from doing so. For us in our own practice here in the Teaching Systems Lab, design thinking is really central to how we try to invent the future. And we think it's a powerful toolkit for you to bring back to your communities, to work with your students, to work with your other faculties and community members, all of this in the service of creating better learning experiences for kids. So let me see if there's any other last questions here. Scott asked, are there any disciplines that aren't good for the design thinking process? And I think for sure, every discipline has its own traditions, and all of those traditions don't necessarily line up with design thinking. But I think there's still applications for design thinking in taking on just about any kind of ill-structured problems. I was a historian, and to a certain extent, when we do history, we go into archives, and the kinds of stuff that we're doing in the archives aren't necessarily connected to design thinking problems. But there are other times that we're thinking about, man, how could I create a public history exhibit that would help people in different ways, other than academic papers, describe what we know? And it's in those kinds of circumstances where I think design thinking can be really powerful and really useful. So thanks so much for coming out, for waking up at all different hours of the day and night to be here, to be able to join us. We're thrilled to have you all as part of this community. If you have other questions and things like that, feel free to let us know in the forums and so forth. And otherwise, we'll really look forward to connecting with you in this course in the weeks ahead. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your morning or rest of your evening.